Saudi Arabia has emerged over the last, particularly 1 decade or so,
Yeah.
to be not just oil rich, not just energy security, but Saudi Arabia has begun to play a huge role in the strategic affairs of the region. To be invited to visit Jeddah is a great honor. It's a great indication of faith and confidence in the relationship. Hajj is an important connection between India and Saudi Arabia because of the Islamic faith. Our role in the Middle East is going to be in harmony with what the Gulf countries are saying and what the West Asia says.
Hello, you're watching India Today Global with me, Shita Mitra. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has kicked off his Saudi Arabia visit. He is in the Gulf Kingdom at the invitation of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, someone he shares a very special relationship with. And therefore, the grand gesture started even before the Prime Minister touched down. Several jets were seen accompanying the plane carrying the Indian Prime Minister in a beautiful gesture. Now, it is a crucial visit because the focus is going to be on economic and defense ties between the two countries. And to put this into perspective, I'm now being joined by former Ambassador Suresh Goel. So thank you, Ambassador, for joining us here on India Today Global.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, sir. Let's talk about the significance of this visit. It's a third one for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, first time in Jeddah. How crucial do you think this is for India?
I think we need to look at one or two things here. First of all, let me just indicate the symbolism.
Yes.
Riyadh is the capital of Saudi Arabia, but Jeddah, it's not Jeddah, it's called Jeddah. So for some reason, a different Arabic. Jeddah is the Islamic capital, so to say. That is a place from where people, when they go for Hajj, and the king of Saudi Arabia is a custodian of the two mosques, and therefore, for any foreign visitor, and that too, please look into this, who is not of the Islamic faith.
Yes.
To be invited to visit Jeddah is a great honor. It's a great indication of faith and confidence in the relationship. And I'm saying that basically because India has two offices in Saudi Arabia. Riyadh is the capital, where anybody can go, but it doesn't matter if you are of Islamic faith or not. But Jeddah, the Consul General, normally somebody who is the Consul General there in Jeddah is Muslim. So that's a kind of a symbolism it is. And therefore, I think, first of all, repose faith, repose confidence in a relationship. I think that's a great indication and a big start for the relationship between India and Saudi Arabia. That is number one.
All right.
Number two, Saudi Arabia has emerged over the last, particularly 1 decade or so, to be not just oil rich, not just energy security, but Saudi Arabia has begun to play a huge role in the strategic affairs of the region, be it Middle Eastern issues, Palestinian issues, be it strategic issues, connectivity to Europe, USA. With the USA has begun to play a big role, and they depend upon Saudi Arabia also on conducting quite a few issues in Gulf and in the Middle East. And that's basically because I think for the current world order, the two pivots in that area for the relationship are Iran and Saudi Arabia. And therefore, I think the visit to Saudi Arabia through Jeddah is a great one, not just from the point of view of energy security, but overall strategic perspective.
All right, sir. You've talked about how important this visit is, but let's go into the discussion bit of it. Both the leaders are going to hold talks. We know that now 6 pacts are going to be signed between the two countries. Energy, defense and economy are going to be the top agenda. So what do you think New Delhi could gain out of this 2-day visit in terms of agreements?
As far as energy is concerned, you mentioned energy, defense, and sorry, which was the other one?
Economy, sir.
Economy, yes. I think if we look at Saudi Arabia, energy is of course an important issue,
Yes.
particularly because of Saudi Arabia being the major oil supplier, and also because there have been several disruptions in the energy supplies, Ukraine war, Iran issue, really, then the American sanctions, and so on and so forth. And therefore, Saudi Arabia is a great factor, and it's a stabilizing factor for Indian energy security. Therefore, the agreement in terms of energy supplies of the crude oil quantities and prices are important. Defense, Saudi Arabia is playing an increasing defense role in the region. And that defense role is both in terms of security of the Gulf, security of the economic connectivity. We have talked about the IMEC, IMEC connectivity project, India, Middle East, Europe connectivity, where Saudi Arabia plays an important role. And therefore, that connectivity, security, defense, all come into that one factor really, where Saudi Arabia will be an important defense partner with India, not just for supply, but also for strategic configuration. Economic goes without saying, we have a huge diaspora there, large remittances from Saudi Arabia. Investment, we are looking, Saudi Arabia is already an important investor in India. India is looking for investing in technologies and also in terms of establishing new projects in Saudi Arabia. So economic connections, diversities, energy, these are all big factors for the relationship.
All right. So it is a relationship that is spanning across a range of factors here. So you talked about IMEC, and Indian Middle East Europe Economic Corridor is something I'd like to talk about in detail as well. It's being touted as a modern Silk Route, a transcontinental trade and transport network which would connect India to Europe via the Middle East. So of course Saudi is going to play a key role in that, and IMEC certainly is something that will be discussed. How do you think it can be aligned with India's economic ambitions and also Saudi's Vision 2030?
You see, this route, I think, predates Silk Route, if I'm not mistaken. And if you read the history of Indian interactions in the presence in the Gulf, you must have read about the markets in Dar es Salaam, not Dar es Salaam, but in Syria, the markets of the markets in Yemen.
Yes.
The boats used to go from the coastal areas in India towards these areas.
Yes.
So we have had the presence. Yes. So we have had the presence of Indian traders in that area more than 1,000 years ago, more than 1,500 years. In fact, they predate Islam even, according to some texts. So therefore, we are reviving those old trade connections between India and the Gulf countries through IMEC. It's important to revive those trade connections. It is important also to find that extension again to Europe. At present, the only connection to Europe is either through Suez, or we go across Africa, to the south of Africa, and then on to the European countries. Therefore, the connectivity project through the Emirates and Saudi Arabia is going to cut through a travel time, and it is going to build up the supply chains with Europe to a great benefit for both the regions. And in this, the Middle East is going to play an important role.
And it is also something that is, seen as that could rival China's BRI.
I have been particularly trying to avoid comparisons with China.
Okay.
You see, the thing really is, we are not playing a comparison game or zero-sum game with China. China has been in the game for a long time. They have built the BRI. They have their own motive. They have their own objectives. China is one of the largest economies at the moment. In fact, it is the number 2 economy, but the largest manufacturing country at the moment.
Yeah.
Therefore, rather than comparing with China as to what they are up to, we need to build up on our own strength. And that's a reason, without comparing with the BRI, I'm calling IMEC in terms of reviving the traditional historical trade ties between India and the Gulf. And those historical factors are going to play an important role to once again really revive and work on the economic connectivity between these countries and India. And I'm sure, given the consonance of interest, given the commonality of interest between the two countries, is going to work great, really, particularly because, like the old time, this route is going to serve Europe also across the continental routes. And I'm going to leave it there. Really speaking, China BRI does not come in the picture as far as IMEC is concerned at all.
All right, sir. Now, speaking of the issues that Prime Minister Modi is going to raise, he's also going to discuss issues related to Hajj, including the quota for Indian pilgrims during his meeting with the Crown Prince. So, how do you think those discussions could go? Because we've seen it is very important for the cultural ties that both the countries share.
Yes. People from India have been going on Hajj to Saudi Arabia for more than 300, 400 years ago. Earlier, the route used to be via Iraq, and they used to go across the mountains. It was or they would go from Yemen across to the Saudi Arabia. Hajj is an important connection between India and Saudi Arabia because of the Islamic faith. India has the largest Islamic population. Saudi Arabia, I remember I was actually dealing with Hajj at one time from the ministry. Saudi Arabia has been always very liberal with Indian Hajj pilgrims traveling to Saudi Arabia. This is the first time in my memory, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, that they are putting a limit on the number of travelers through the visa issue.
Yes, because
even earlier, the number of Hajj pilgrims was actually decided through conversations between the two governments, because eventually the facilities in that area are not infinite. So they need to be very judiciously and very logically distributed to the various travelers. I'm sure the conversations will take place on the Indian Hajj travelers, but we will work according to the convenience, according to the conditions on ground existing there. And I'm sure the two governments will work together in terms of what the Hajj pilgrims from India may want to do. There's no difference between the two governments on this, and they will work together.
All right, sir. Now, speaking largely about the ties, so ties between India and Saudi Arabia, they've grown tremendously. As you mentioned before, both the countries have come closer over the past decade and even ahead of the visit, which was in the statement that Prime Minister Modi released. He even described Saudi Arabia as one of India's most valued partners. And then there's also, this special rapport that Prime Minister Modi shares with the Crown Prince. So, Ambassador, how do you assess the ties between the two countries at this point?
I have mentioned investments, Indian and Saudi investments in India.
Yes.
I have mentioned India wanting to invest in the technology projects in Saudi Arabia. There is a large number of Indian expatriate community in Saudi Arabia. Remittances from Saudi Arabia to India play a great role in our own economic and our own dollar reserves. So I think there is a huge ground which covers with the interest between the common interest between the two countries. And I have mentioned about the special gesture being shown to Prime Minister Modi to come to Jeddah. So I think there are all great signals. And I'm quite certain that given the strategic resonance between India and Saudi Arabia, in that the situation in Middle East, Palestine is one ground. Situation in Europe, what is happening in Ukraine is another development, another issue.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia and India are going to work together on several issues of global interest, which actually will have an impact on the world order in the days to come. And this is a great augury for that, really.
So clearly, it's a multifaceted relationship. It's an important relationship. So now I want to talk about, sir, because you mentioned about West Asia and Ukraine war. We know this visit comes at a time when the region is going through a difficult time. You have Israel-Hamas war. You have tensions rising between Iran and the US as well. So do you think, because Saudi Arabia has also played a role of negotiator in those conflicts, so when discussions will feature in this regard, do you think India's role could also come up as a negotiator, or what kind of discussions are we looking at on these issues?
As far as Palestinian issue is concerned, Saudi position is very well known.
Yes.
And therefore, even if they're not negotiating directly, and the negotiations take place between Hamas and Israel, but both sides will take into account what Saudi positions are, even if they're not part of the negotiating team. And that matters quite a bit, really, because in terms of the strategic metrics, if something happens which Saudi Arabia does not quite agree with, it's not likely to happen. India, I would again say that India has a lot of weight in the global issues now, but for that weight to be really a factor, and I'm being very careful with the words here, India does not have to be a direct negotiator in any of the issues. In fact, I think at the moment, in terms of what is happening in the Middle East and what is happening in Ukraine, I don't think any great purpose will be served if India were to get involved in the negotiations. On the other hand, India can play a much better role by letting its positions be known through public statements or through conversations with the parties, let them know what our stand is, but not directly become part of the negotiations.
All right, so my last question to you is, we've talked about India's relationship with Saudi Arabia, but it's not just Saudi Arabia that India has been reaching out to. In West Asia at large, we've been able to dehyphenate our foreign policy with Israel and Palestine as well. We've been able to reach out to UAE as well. So how would you assess India's foreign policy when it comes to West Asia? You know, the way we have been increasing our outreach, especially under Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
I don't think distancing ourselves from developments in Palestinian lands, Palestinian issues, is going to be possible to a great extent.
Okay.
Because even our relations with the West Asia and the relations with the Gulf countries would involve to quite a large extent what our positions on the Middle East or the Palestinian issues are.
Okay. So they are linked together.
Qatar, etc. At all times, they have always supported an independent Palestinian country, nation. So have we. Positions of Israel are slightly different. USA wants to develop a kind of a Middle Eastern Riviera in Gaza, which is not what we will be supporting, or we have supported.
We are a supporter of two-state solution.
And therefore, I think basically our role in the Middle East is going to be in harmony with what the Gulf countries are saying and what the West Asia says. And there is not going to be any great difference between those positions.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us here, giving us, in crux, explaining us what could this visit mean for New Delhi and Saudi Arabia, and also what India's policy stand is when it comes to West Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, viewers, for tuning in. Stay tuned to India Today Global, where we simplify geopolitics for you.